Aquarius. March carries a rhythm that feels a little different. Not exactly a clear change, not quite a turning point, just a quiet, undefined feeling, as if something inside you is slowly shifting. You are still yourself, calm, observant, keeping just enough distance from your emotions. And yet, somewhere deeper, certain thoughts begin to return. Memories brush gently against the present. And a few questions seem to linger without a complete answer. Then one day, in the middle of everything familiar, a moment appears. Not strong enough to stop you in your tracks, but just enough for you to notice. Your emotions are no longer standing still. And what stands out is this: that shift doesn't seem to come from anything big. It begins with a person, someone you may have known before, or someone you never really paid attention to until now. So, what is it really about a meeting that seems so ordinary that it can reach you in such a quiet, yet deeply unexpected way? March opens in a way that feels familiar. Mornings move along in their usual rhythm. The same responsibilities are still there, and you, as always, keep just enough distance from the world around you. That's the Aquarius way. Not cold, just someone who chooses to observe rather than rush in. You listen, you reflect, and you let things unfold in their own time. So there's no real reason to think that day would be any different. Everything feels normal. Until a moment appears. Maybe it's a passing glance, a short conversation, or a message that arrives when you weren't expecting it. Not strong enough to disrupt your life right away. Not clear enough for you to name what it is, but it stays. It lingers longer than an ordinary moment. It stays in your thoughts as the day moves on. It stays in a feeling you can't quite explain. And then, something very subtle begins to happen. You notice yourself thinking about it again. Not because you're trying to, but because it returns on its own, like a small ripple on still water. It doesn't change the entire ocean, but it's enough to remind you that the surface is no longer completely calm. You continue with your life. You hold on to your familiar sense of composure. You remain the person who sees things through a rational lens. And yet, somewhere deep inside, something has shifted, even if just a little. And maybe what stays with you isn't the moment itself, but the feeling it leaves behind. A feeling that's hard to name. Not quite clear happiness, not exactly a strong emotional pull, just a very gentle touch. As if someone, without meaning to, brushed against a door you had closed long ago, not opening it completely, but just enough for a little light to slip through. And you begin to wonder, was it only a passing coincidence or something worth noticing? Even just a little more. And when you take a closer look at that moment, something begins to become clear in a very quiet way. This person isn't entirely unfamiliar. Maybe they appeared at some point in your life. Not long enough to stay, but not brief enough to completely disappear. A name you've heard before. A familiar face you never expected to see again. Or a connection that once opened, then quietly closed before you ever understood why. It's also possible they've always been somewhere in your world, just that before. You never paused long enough to truly notice them. But this time, it feels different. Not because they've become someone entirely new, not because everything around you has changed, but because you are no longer the same version of yourself. You've moved through days when emotions were set aside, moments when you chose logic over listening to your heart, experiences that taught you something deeper, that not everything clear is truly meaningful, and not everything gentle is insignificant. A quiet kind of growth has taken place within you. No audience, no explanation, just a shift in the way you see things. And so, the same person in a different moment now brings a feeling you've never quite experienced this way before. Not overwhelming. Not something that pushes you to make a decision right away. Just a sense of familiarity, carrying a depth you hadn't noticed before, like hearing an old song again. But this time, you understand every lyric, and what makes you pause isn't how much they've changed, but how you are beginning to feel their presence. Soft, yet enough to make you realize that some connections don't truly disappear. They simply wait for the right moment to be seen more clearly. And maybe what matters here isn't the question, why did this person return, but rather, why you at this moment in your life are ready to feel them in a different way. And then, from that very subtle realization, something else begins to form within you. You are still someone who leans on logic, still inclined to see things through a clear lens, to observe, to analyze. Is it to keep your emotions within a certain sense of control? Because, in a way, that's how you learn to protect yourself, keeping just enough distance so you don't go too deep, understanding just enough so you don't get pulled into things you can't quite explain. But this time, it doesn't feel exactly the same. There's nothing intense pushing you to change right away, nothing clear enough for you to fully define it. It's simply a very gentle presence, slipping into spaces you didn't even notice before. And you begin to realize you're not responding the way you used to. A message arrives, and you don't rush to analyze it like data, a passing glance, and you don't immediately try to explain it away. Instead, you pause a little longer, not to find answers, but to feel. And in those small, quiet moments, yet you notice something you may have overlooked before. Your heart is no longer silent. It doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't demand change overnight, but it's there, present in the way someone stays on your mind a little longer than usual, in the way you slow down when you think about a conversation, in the way you begin to ask questions you once avoided, not questions that need immediate answers, but open ones that invite you to stay with yourself a little longer. What am I really feeling? And what happens if I let this feeling stay just a little while longer? That isn't weakness. It isn't losing control. It's a different kind of listening, deeper, slower, more honest. Like sitting alone in a quiet room, and for the first time in a long while, not trying to fill the silence with thoughts. You simply remain and realize, you are still capable of feeling. And maybe what makes you pause isn't where this feeling might lead, but the quiet awareness that you can still open your heart, even if only a little. There's no need to rush, no need to define everything right away. Just slow down enough to notice that your heart is still speaking in its own way. And this time, maybe, you're finally ready to listen. And as you begin to listen to your heart a little more clearly, the way you see that encounter starts to shift. It no longer feels like something you need to figure out right away. No longer a story that needs a clear beginning or a defined ending. It simply becomes an experience as it unfolds. You may start to realize that not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay for a long time. Some people appear only briefly, like a passing breeze. Not enough to change the entire sky, but enough for you to notice the air feels different. And this meeting may be just like that. It doesn't have to become something big. It doesn't need to turn into a clearly defined relationship. It might even fade before you have the chance to name what it was. And yet, what gives it meaning is what it awakens within you. You begin to remember what it feels like to care about someone without overthinking it. You realize you can still feel something in a very gentle way, without pressure, without rushing. And more importantly, you begin to understand yourself a little more deeply. Not what you once believed you needed, but what truly brings you a sense of peace when you're with someone. Maybe before, you thought you needed something clear, something certain. But now, you begin to see that real connection can come from the simplest things. A presence that lets you be yourself. A feeling that you don't have to try to become someone else. A quiet space where you don't need to stay guarded. And maybe that's what you've been searching for all along, without ever quite naming it. This person may not stay long enough to become a permanent part of your life, but they bring you something else, a mirror. Not so you can look at them, but so you can see yourself, to notice how you feel, how you open up, and how you are still capable of connecting, even after choosing distance for so long. Some encounters aren't meant to change your life in a dramatic way, but they leave behind something far more subtle, a quiet awakening that only you can truly feel. And maybe what matters most isn't whether that person stays, but that, in one brief moment, they helped you find a very real part of yourself, a part you once thought had been left behind. And when you look back at everything that has unfolded, a very gentle thought begins to take shape. Maybe the most meaningful shift this March isn't about the person who appeared, and not about where the story might lead. It's about you, about the way you're beginning to see your emotions differently, the way you no longer rush to dismiss what you feel the moment it appears, the way you allow yourself to pause just a little longer so you can truly notice what's happening within you. There was a time when keeping everything under control felt necessary, keeping your heart in a safe place, keeping your emotions within what could be explained. But this time, you're not trying to make everything clear right away. You're beginning to accept that some feelings don't need to be defined immediately. Some connections don't need a specific name, and some moments are enough simply by being fully experienced. There's no need to rush, no need to decide whether something is right or wrong, whether it should continue or not. Just stay with the feeling a little longer. Notice it, like watching a wave reach the shore and gently pull back. Feel it, like becoming aware of a passing breeze without trying to hold on to it. And somewhere in that process, you may begin to realize something quietly meaningful. You are changing. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a way that runs deep. You're becoming a little more gentle with yourself. You're no longer avoiding the softer parts of who you are. You're no longer treating feeling as something that needs to be controlled. Instead, you begin to trust that your emotions have their own voice. And if you're still here, listening to this moment, there may be something within you that has just been touched, a memory, a face, or a feeling you've never quite named. A moment that isn't entirely clear, not certain, but real enough to stay with you. And maybe what matters isn't whether the story continues, but what it helped you see within yourself. This March, you don't have to search for answers right away. Just allow things to move in their own rhythm, slowly, naturally, honestly. Because sometimes the deepest changes in life don't begin with something big, but with a very quiet moment when you choose to listen to your own heart.